There comes a time in your life when you realize this. Not every emotion deserves a reaction. Not every insult deserves your energy. And not every situation deserves your peace. The real power, it's not in clapping back. It's not in arguing louder. It's not in making someone understand your side. The real power is in being able to sit in your silence, detached from the drama, calm in your own skin. That's when you've mastered yourself. And when you've mastered yourself, you are no longer controlled by anyone or anything around you. Let's talk about how silence isn't just golden. It's your greatest emotional weapon. Learning to emotionally detach doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop letting your emotions control you. That's a huge difference most people don't understand. When someone says detach, they immediately assume it's about becoming cold, indifferent, or emotionally unavailable. But that's not what real detachment is. Emotional detachment is not about shutting down your heart. It's about opening your mind. It's the shift from reacting to responding, from absorbing everything to observing everything. It's the act of choosing peace over chaos again and again, no matter how loud the world gets. When you care deeply about people or situations, your emotions become tied to outcomes. You want them to act a certain way. You expect things to turn out in your favor. You get attached to how things should be. And when that doesn't happen, it throws you off balance. You spiral, you overthink, you start saying things you don't mean just to feel like you're back in control. But here's the thing. Control doesn't come from grasping tighter. It comes from letting go of what isn't yours to hold. Caring too much about everything, especially things you can't control, is emotional burnout waiting to happen. You're not supposed to bleed energy over every text that goes unanswered, every opinion that feels like an attack, every moment that doesn't go exactly your way. That kind of emotional overinvolvement doesn't make you strong. It drains you. Emotional detachment, on the other hand, is the art of choosing your emotional investments wisely. Not everyone deserves access to your emotional bandwidth. Not every situation needs your full emotional involvement. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step back and observe without attaching yourself to the outcome. Think about it. How many times have you replayed a conversation in your head long after it ended? How many nights have you stayed up wondering why someone acted the way they did, why they didn't call, why they didn't treat you better? That's emotional overinvestment. You're pouring your energy into situations that have already passed, into people who've already made their choices. Emotional detachment allows you to take a breath and say, I see what's happening, but I won't lose myself in it. It's the moment when you stop letting your emotions be dictated by external chaos. Detachment doesn't make you less human. It makes you more aware. You still care, but you care with boundaries. You can love someone and still not allow their dysfunction to dominate your peace. You can want something and still accept that it might not happen the way you imagine. That's strength. That's wisdom. That's emotional maturity. And the best part? It doesn't depend on anyone else. Detachment is something you practice within yourself. You don't need permission to stop giving your energy to things that exhaust you. You don't need to explain why you're no longer available for emotional tug-of-war with people who refuse to grow. The truth is, emotionally detached people aren't cold. They're clear. They've learned the hard way that not everything deserves a reaction. They've felt the emotional hangover of caring too much and getting nothing back. They've experienced the weight of carrying other people's emotions as if they were their own, and they've made the conscious choice to put their peace first. That doesn't mean they don't feel. It means they've learned how to feel without drowning. This kind of detachment isn't built overnight. It takes practice. It takes self-awareness. It takes the willingness to sit with discomfort instead of trying to fix it right away. But with time, you start to see the shift. You stop explaining yourself to people who twist your words. You stop overanalyzing situations that were never meant to make sense. You stop reacting emotionally to people who thrive on your chaos. And in that space, in that pause, you find power. You find clarity. You find yourself. You start to realize that peace is not passive. It's a decision. It's a boundary. It's a lifestyle. And the people who mistake your detachment for indifference, they've never known what it's like to love themselves enough to stop bleeding for things that don't reciprocate. You have. You're learning. And every time you choose silence, every time you choose not to react, every time you walk away from drama without the need to prove your point, you are building emotional muscle. You are reclaiming your power. And that right there is what emotional detachment is really about. Not about caring less, but about caring smart, about caring for yourself first, so that no matter what happens, you don't lose the most important thing you have, your inner peace. People underestimate silence. They see it as inaction, as weakness, as backing down. But the truth is, silence is one of the most powerful emotional tools you'll ever learn to use. Because silence is not about shutting down. It's about rising above. It's a conscious choice to protect your energy, to withhold your response until it serves a purpose, and to reclaim the emotional space that others often try to invade. Think about how most people react. Someone says something triggering and instantly, boom, the reaction flies out. Words are said that can't be taken back. Voices rise. Defenses go up. And then what? Regret, exhaustion, emotional hangovers. You lose your peace. You lose control. All because the moment owned you instead of you owning the moment. Now let's flip the script. Imagine someone pushes your buttons. Instead of reacting, you pause, you observe, you breathe, you let the silence sit there like a shield between their chaos and your clarity. In that moment, they don't get what they came for. They came for your reaction. They came to pull you down to their level, but you gave them nothing. And that nothing, that was everything. Because silence is not passive, it's active restraint. It's strength under pressure. It's emotional intelligence in its rawest form. When you stay silent in situations that beg for drama, you take away someone else's control over your nervous system. You stop letting external events dictate your internal state. That's not weakness, that's mastery. You become the calm in the storm, not the storm itself. But let's be honest. Silence is hard. It's uncomfortable, especially if you're someone who feels the need to defend, to explain, to be understood. There's a part of us that wants to jump in and set the record straight. But here's what you need to know. Your peace is worth more than your point. Your silence protects more than your argument ever could. Sometimes silence says, I'm not lowering myself to this level. Sometimes silence says, I see what you're doing, and I choose me. Silence, when used with intention, is not disconnection, it's elevation. You start to notice patterns. The person who constantly pushes you to react doesn't want resolution, they want control. They thrive off of your emotional response because it gives them power. But silence strips that power away. It unsettles people who are used to emotional chaos. They don't know what to do when you stop engaging. They become louder. They push harder. But the more you stay still, the more obvious their behavior becomes. And eventually, the game ends because you stopped playing. Silence also gives you time to think, time to process, time to decide how you want to show up instead of reacting out of habit. That pause between stimulus and response is where your growth happens. That's where you choose who you want to be, not just what you want to say. And sometimes silence isn't just about what you don't say, it's about what you make space for. You make space for clarity, for healing, for wisdom to rise instead of ego. When you stop filling every gap with noise, you start hearing your own intuition more clearly. You start trusting yourself more deeply. You realize that not everything requires a statement, a clapback, or an explanation. Some things just need to be left exactly where they are, beneath you. Here's the irony. When you stop trying to prove a point, your presence starts proving it for you. People notice your stillness. They feel your shift. You don't need to shout your worth when you're living it. You don't need to argue for your value when you embody it. Silence becomes your state. And if someone takes your silence the wrong way, that's not your burden to carry. Let them assume. Let them guess. Let them project. Because their confusion isn't your responsibility. Your only job is to stay rooted in your peace. That's your true power. The ability to hold your ground without raising your voice. It's not about being cold. It's about being in control of your energy, of your emotions, of your reactions. Silence is not a wall. It's a filter. It keeps out what doesn't deserve your spirit. It's the pause that protects you, the space that empowers you, the moment where you take back your life from the grip of reactivity. So train yourself to pause, to breathe, to choose stillness when noise tries to pull you in. That's not weakness. That's discipline. That's self-respect. And more than anything, that's how you step into a life where your peace is non-negotiable and your silence speaks louder than any words ever could. Every time you react emotionally, you hand over your power. That's a truth most people don't want to admit, because reacting feels good in the moment. It feels like you're standing up for yourself. It feels like you're defending your worth. But what you're really doing is giving someone else control over your emotional state. You're letting them press a button and make you explode. You're letting their behavior dictate your energy. And the second you do that, you've lost. Emotional reactivity is one of the most common reasons people stay stuck in toxic dynamics. You keep engaging, you keep explaining, you keep trying to be heard, and that creates a loop. You say something out of anger, they respond with something worse, and now you're both drowning in emotional chaos. Nothing gets solved. You just keep escalating. And with every reaction, you reinforce a pattern that chips away at your peace, your confidence, and your self. It takes awareness to realize how much of your energy gets drained by reacting. Think about how many times you've walked away from a conversation feeling exhausted, not because of what was said, but because of how deeply you got pulled into it. You felt the need to correct, to clarify, to prove yourself right. You couldn't let it go. You needed to respond. That urgency is a trap. And it's a trap designed to keep you emotionally hooked. People who thrive in chaos, whether consciously or not, will always try to pull you into their storm. They don't want resolution. They want reaction, because your reaction validates their behavior. It proves they still have access to your emotions. And as long as they have access, they have control. That's why learning to emotionally detach isn't about shutting down. It's about choosing your response instead of being ruled by it. When you start to observe instead of absorb, everything changes. You stop living in defense mode. You start recognizing patterns instead of participating in them. You become aware that not everything deserves your energy. Not every opinion requires a rebuttal. Not every insult needs a reply. Most things lose power the moment you stop feeding them. But this isn't easy. We're wired to defend ourselves. We want to be seen and understood. So when someone misrepresents you or disrespects you, every part of your nervous system wants to jump in. That's normal. What's powerful is when you can notice that urge and not act on it. You feel the fire rise in your chest, the words forming in your throat, the need to fight back. And instead of reacting, you choose calm, you breathe, you hold your space, you say nothing, not because you're afraid, but because you're focused on a bigger picture, your peace. This doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect or mistreatment. It means you decide how to respond, when to respond, and if the situation even deserves a response at all. Most of the time, your silence will speak louder than anything you could say. It shows you're no longer playing the game. You're no longer dancing with dysfunction. You're done letting other people's chaos become your own. Over time, something shifts. The more you detach from reactive behavior, the more confident you become in your emotional space. You start to trust yourself to handle difficult people without losing yourself. You become less triggered, more observant, more in control. And people notice. They can feel the shift. The ones who used to get a rise out of you don't know how to handle your silence. The ones who fed off your emotional availability start losing their grip. And that's exactly the point. Emotional detachment gives you freedom. Not freedom from feeling, but freedom from being manipulated by feeling. You're still human. You'll still get angry, sad, hurt, but now you hold space for those emotions without letting them run the show. You know when to speak and when to stay silent. You know when to engage and when to walk away. You don't operate on impulse. You operate with intention. This is mastery, not because you never feel, but because you no longer let your feelings drag you into emotional battles that drain your soul. You choose peace over proving your point. You choose silence over noise. And in that silence, you become more powerful than you ever were when you were shouting, explaining, defending, because now you're not reacting to the world. You're leading yourself through it. Your nervous system is like the command center of your entire emotional life. It's the one quietly running the show behind every reaction, every impulse, every outburst you regret later. And yet most people go through life completely unaware of just how much their nervous system dictates their reality. The truth is, you don't need more willpower. You need more regulation. You don't need to toughen up. You need to slow down. You don't need to fight harder. You need to teach your system how to feel safe without chaos. That's the root of emotional detachment and calmness. That's how you stay grounded no matter what's happening around you. We live in a world that rewards speed and intensity. People react within seconds. They send the angry text, say the unfiltered words, or storm out of a room because their nervous system is in survival mode. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. When someone says something triggering, your brain doesn't pause to ask, is this worth my peace? No, it immediately prepares for war. It floods your body with adrenaline. Your heart races, your muscles tighten, and you suddenly feel like you have to do something right now. That's not your logic talking. That's your nervous system screaming, we're in danger. The problem is the danger isn't always real. Sometimes it's just a misinterpreted tone, a look, a delay in a text reply, or a difficult conversation that challenges your ego. And if your body is used to chaos, it will treat every uncomfortable moment like a threat. That's why emotional regulation isn't just about knowing what to say, it's about knowing how to stay. Stay in the moment, stay with yourself, stay in your breath. Because when you stay, instead of reacting, you're retraining your nervous system to understand that discomfort doesn't mean destruction. Think about it. How many times have you overreacted to something small only to feel drained, embarrassed, or regretful afterward? That's not because you're broken. It's because your nervous system is running on a script that was probably written years ago, maybe even in childhood. If you grew up around volatility, inconsistency, or emotional neglect, your body learned to expect chaos And now as an adult, you subconsciously recreate it, chase it, or explode in it because it feels familiar. But familiar doesn't mean safe. And calmness, real calmness, has to be taught. It has to be felt. It has to be earned through consistent practice. That starts by listening to your body before it explodes. Do you clench your jaw when things get tense? Do you hold your breath? Do your shoulders rise, your voice sharpen, your fists tighten? These are the signals. These are the little red flags your nervous system throws up when it's about to go into overdrive. And here's the opportunity. When you notice them, you can pause. You can breathe. You can ground yourself. That pause might only last a few seconds, but it rewires everything, because instead of handing your power over to the emotion, you stay with it, you let it move through you without becoming it. Staying calm doesn't mean you're unaffected. It means you're choosing to protect your energy. It means you're refusing to be hijacked by other people's projections, moods, or games. It's a sign that you're not afraid of silence or discomfort or even rejection, because you trust yourself to handle it. And that self-trust comes directly from nervous system regulation, from learning how to slow your breath, from sitting in discomfort without needing to fix it, from walking away not out of avoidance but out of wisdom. When your nervous system is regulated, you become a different version of yourself. You communicate clearly, not defensively. You respond thoughtfully, not reactively. You protect your peace without having to explain it. People might even start calling you cold or unbothered, but that's because they're not used to someone who doesn't flinch at emotional chaos. You'll start to notice who's trying to provoke a reaction out of you, and instead of engaging, you'll feel gratitude, because every trigger becomes a teacher. Every moment of tension becomes a training ground. This work isn't glamorous. It's not loud. It happens in the quiet moments. When you choose to take a walk instead of arguing. When you put your phone down instead of sending the last word. When you step back, breathe deeply, and say to yourself, this isn't worth my peace. Over time, those small decisions compound. They become habits, and those habits become your default state. Calm, centered, and untouchable. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't need to prove your point to feel worthy. You don't need to react to every situation to show you care. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is breathe through the discomfort and let the moment pass. Because no one else is responsible for calming your storm. That's your job. And the more you lead your nervous system, instead of letting it lead you, the more powerful, grounded, and emotionally free you become. When you step back emotionally, something incredible starts to happen. You begin to see clearly, not through the lens of pain, not through the storm of your emotions, but through truth. That space you create by detaching isn't a void, it's a window. A window into what's actually happening, without your feelings distorting the facts. Most people don't even realize how clouded their judgment becomes when they're too close to the fire. They mistake their reaction as reality. But emotional detachment gives you a kind of clarity you can't buy. It has to be earned through self-awareness and practice. Think about it like this. When you're in the middle of a chaotic moment, whether it's a fight, a breakup, or a betrayal, your emotions are in the driver's seat. You're not seeing the situation, you're feeling it. And feelings, as real as they are, don't always tell the truth. They tell you how you're experiencing a moment, but not necessarily what the moment actually is. Emotional detachment creates a pause between stimulus and response, and in that pause, you gain control over what happens next. When you're emotionally attached, you're too busy reacting. You're jumping to conclusions, overanalyzing words, assuming intentions, and letting your imagination fuel the story. But when you detach, you stop adding fire to the fiction. You stop assuming. You stop bleeding for things that were never about you in the first place. Detachment gives you a backstage pass to your own mind. You start asking better questions. Is this really about me? Is this even worth my energy? What am I making this mean? You begin to recognize patterns. You see the same dynamics playing out with different people, and you start understanding that the common denominator might be your emotional investment in people who haven't earned it. Clarity means realizing you've been giving your peace away for free. It means acknowledging that just because something feels urgent doesn't mean it is. Most people run around putting out fires that would burn out on their own if they just stopped feeding them with attention. Clarity also helps you remember your boundaries. When you're too emotionally tied to someone, you lose sight of what you allow versus what you deserve. You start making excuses, tolerating things, shrinking yourself just to keep the peace. But when you detach, you return to yourself. You see what you've been accepting, and you realize it's far below your standards, not because you're unlovable, but because you forgot how to love yourself first. You start choosing peace over approval, sanity over validation. Detachment isn't the absence of care, it's the presence of perspective. It's the inner wisdom that says, I care deeply, but I care wisely. It's realizing that you can love someone and still walk away, that you can be hurt and still stay silent, that you can witness chaos without becoming part of it. You stop trying to control people's perception of you, and instead you control what you allow into your energy. That's not cold, that's conscious. And the best part? The more you detach, the more power you reclaim. The power to think clearly, the power to make intentional decisions, the power to say no without guilt. You begin to notice how much more energy you have when you're not draining it on trying to fix what's outside your control. You stop trying to rewrite someone else's behavior and instead rewrite your own response. This clarity spreads. It starts showing up in every area of your life. You become better at choosing friends, setting boundaries, walking away from jobs, and ending conversations that go nowhere. You start seeing red flags sooner because you're no longer coloring them with your hopes. You stop negotiating with reality. You stop ignoring your instincts just to keep something familiar. The more you step back emotionally, the more you step into your power. You realize that not everything deserves a comment. Not everyone deserves a reaction, and not every battle is yours to fight. You no longer chase closure because clarity has already delivered it to you. You don't need the apology. You don't need the explanation. You don't need to be understood. You just need to protect your peace. Emotional detachment and silence together are not about becoming distant. They're about becoming aligned. Aligned with who you are, aligned with what you value, aligned with what you will and will not accept. And once you experience that kind of clarity, you stop going back to confusion because now you've seen too much. You've felt what it's like to be grounded, calm, and in control. And once that becomes your new normal, chaos loses its appeal. You don't have to win every battle to win the war. This is one of the most freeing truths you'll ever learn, especially when it comes to emotional detachment and staying calm. See, the problem is we're wired to think we have to constantly defend ourselves, respond to every criticism, fix every misunderstanding, and prove our point every single time. But that's a trap. That's how people get pulled into fights that aren't even theirs to begin with. That's how peace gets destroyed, not in one dramatic moment, but in a series of small emotional reactions that slowly drain your energy. The moment you realize that not every battle is worth fighting, you step into a new level of maturity. This isn't about being passive. It's about being powerful in how you choose to use your energy. There are people who will deliberately push your buttons, people who thrive on chaos, people who feed off your reactions. They want you to engage, to get pulled into the noise, to start explaining, defending, justifying, because the moment you do that, you are no longer in control. You're on their playing field, and their game is never about truth. It's about control. There's a reason some people keep dragging you into the same argument over and over. It's because they know exactly where to strike. They know your patterns. They know what words to use to make you snap. And the more you react, the more you train them and yourself to stay in that cycle. But the moment you choose silence, the moment you don't show up to the fight, you break that cycle. You disrupt the script they've written for you. You create a gap. And in that gap, you reclaim your power. This doesn't mean you ignore everything. It means you choose your battles with precision. You evaluate, is this conversation going to bring clarity or just more confusion? Is this situation going to help me grow or just exhaust me? Is this person really open to hearing me, or are they just trying to prove they're right? Most times, the answers to those questions will tell you everything you need to know. And when you realize that engaging won't change the outcome, you stop engaging. Think about how many times you've walked away from an argument feeling worse, not better. Think about how often you've explained yourself to someone who wasn't even listening. Think about the emotional hangover that comes from pouring your heart into a conversation that only left you drained. That's the cost of fighting battles that don't matter. That's the price of trying to win moments that are better left alone. There's so much strength in restraint. Silence doesn't mean you're giving up. It means you're choosing the higher ground. It means you see the bigger picture. You know that your peace, your time, your clarity, those are resources. And like any resource, they need to be protected. You wouldn't pour water into a broken cup. So why pour your energy into a broken argument? Why pour your words into someone who only hears what they want? The truth is, the war is about long-term peace. The war is about protecting your mind, your emotions, your self-respect. Winning every battle might feel good for a moment, but it doesn't bring long-term victory if it keeps you emotionally unstable. That's why some things and some people are best left in silence. Because no response is a response. Because walking away is sometimes the most powerful statement you can make. You don't owe the world your reactions. You don't have to prove your worth through confrontation. The loudest people in the room are often the most insecure. The calmest ones, they've already won battles you don't even see. They've learned that true power is in choosing when to speak and when to let silence do the talking. You want to live a grounded, powerful life? Start protecting your energy like it's your most valuable asset, 'cause it is. Start treating your attention like a currency, 'cause it is. And start realizing that peace is not something you find after the fight. It's something you protect by not entering it in the first place. You've got nothing to prove to people who are determined to misunderstand you. You've got nothing to defend when your peace speaks louder than your words ever could. And most of all, you've got better things to do than waste time fighting battles that keep you stuck. The real win is walking away and still feeling whole, still feeling clear, still feeling calm. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. And that's how you win the war without ever having to pick up a sword. People who try to provoke you are often fighting battles within themselves, and when you stay calm, you force them to confront that storm without pulling you into it. Your calmness becomes a mirror. It shows them their own chaos, their own desperation, their own lack of control. And this is why calmness is not just a virtue, it's a tool. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to defend yourself to be respected. When you're calm, when you're still, when you choose to remain unshaken in the middle of emotional chaos, you radiate a presence that demands more than attention. It commands energy. Think about the last time someone came at you with drama. Maybe they were angry, throwing blame, trying to press every button you have. The natural reaction? Fight back, say something smart, prove a point. But if you've ever held your silence in that moment, if you've ever looked at them without matching their energy, then you know the power that silence carries. You know how it flips the entire dynamic. They want your reaction. It validates them. It feeds their story. It gives them something to fight. But when you stay calm, you give them nothing. And in that nothing, they are left to face themselves. This is where emotional mastery begins, not in suppressing your emotions, but in learning how to regulate them when the situation calls for it. Your calmness isn't fake. It's not avoidance. It's discipline. It's strength. When you stay calm, you're not dismissing the issue. You're prioritizing your peace. You're refusing to let someone else's storm disrupt your inner stillness. And that makes people uncomfortable, not because you're wrong, but because you're no longer reacting in the way they expect. We live in a world that celebrates loud. Everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to be seen. But the most powerful people in the room are usually the ones who say the least and observe the most. Their calm presence isn't silence born out of fear. It's silence born out of self-respect. They don't need to match energy. They hold their own. They know who they are, and they don't need validation to stand in their truth. The hardest part about staying calm is breaking the cycle you've been conditioned to live in. If you grew up always having to defend yourself, explain yourself, or prove your worth, then silence will feel like weakness at first. But that's only because you've been taught that your power comes from reaction. The truth is, your power comes from restraint, from knowing you could react, but choosing not to. That choice is everything. That choice is freedom. People will test your boundaries. They will misinterpret your calm as indifference. They will mistake your silence as guilt. Let them. You don't owe anyone the emotional version of yourself that bends every time they push. You owe yourself the peace that comes from not letting them drag you into emotional quicksand. Because that's what emotional chaos is. It's quicksand. You think you're stepping in to fix something, to clear your name, to defend your integrity. But the more you engage, the deeper you sink. The more you react, the more power you hand over. Your calmness is the exit. It's the ladder out. It's the moment you decide, I don't have to do this. I don't have to engage. I can sit here, I can breathe, and I can let them wrestle with themselves. And it's hard. Let's be real. It's incredibly hard to not react when someone's attacking your character, twisting your words, or acting like you owe them a version of yourself you've outgrown. But silence in those moments is a signal, not just to them, but to yourself, that you've changed, that you're no longer reactive, that you've learned that not everything deserves your energy, that you've evolved. And the more you practice this kind of calmness, the more powerful it becomes. You'll notice how people stop bringing drama to you. You'll see how manipulative conversations lose their grip. You'll feel how much lighter your life becomes when you stop letting emotional turbulence enter your space. That's not coldness. That's protection. That's not apathy. That's alignment. When you value your calm, you naturally distance yourself from anyone who does. It's not about being emotionless. It's about being emotionally intelligent, about knowing when to speak and when to be still, when to engage and when to step back, when to stand your ground and when to let your silence do the talking, because sometimes silence speaks louder than any argument ever could. Sometimes silence is the loudest form of self-respect. And the people who truly see you, truly value you, they'll recognize it. And the ones who don't, let your calm be the mirror that shows them who they are. Without saying a word, when you learn to sit in silence, not just around others, but within yourself, you start building a kind of confidence that doesn't need to be loud, flashy, or even visible. It's deep, it's grounded, and most importantly, it's unshakable. You're no longer tossed around by every wave of opinion, every shift in someone else's mood, or every misunderstanding that comes your way. You start to anchor yourself in a calm that no one can take from you because it was built by you for you. Silence teaches you how to listen. Not just to others, but to your own instincts. You start to separate what's noise from what's necessary. Most people are constantly reacting to texts, to tone, to looks, to energy. But when you make silence your default, you train yourself to pause and reflect before responding. That's where confidence grows, not in being the loudest, but in being the most centered. Think about it. How many times have you regretted saying something too soon, reacting too fast, or lashing out because your emotions hijacked the moment? Silence helps you avoid that. It gives you space between the trigger and the reaction. And in that space, you get to decide who you want to be. That choice is everything. Because confidence isn't built by dominating every conversation. It's built by mastering your own responses. It's knowing that no matter what happens around you, you are not required to abandon yourself to match the chaos. When you stop chasing validation, something incredible happens. Your energy returns to you. You stop waiting for people to agree with you or understand you. You stop begging for explanations or trying to make people see your point. You realize that your peace, your calm, your silence speaks louder than any argument. When someone is trying to get a reaction out of you and they can't, you become untouchable. Because your power isn't in how you respond, it's in how you choose not to. This isn't about being silent forever. It's about learning when silence is the most powerful choice. Not every situation needs your opinion. Not every conflict needs your involvement. And not every person deserves access to your emotional energy. You become powerful the moment you realize that you're not obligated to entertain every battle. Some things are better left unanswered. Some people are better left wondering. And that mystery, that composure, creates a presence that people feel even when you say nothing. There's a level of confidence that grows when you know you can handle your own emotions in private. When you don't need to post about it, scream about it, or cry to the world just to prove that you're strong. You just are. Because you've sat with your pain in silence, you've processed your fear alone, you've picked yourself back up without applause. And when you've done that enough times, you start to walk differently. You move through the world with a quiet kind of certainty. You don't need anyone to validate your worth. You already know it. Emotional detachment plays a huge role in this. It's not shutting down, it's leveling up. You stop attaching your mood to other people's behavior. If they're distant, you stay centered. If they're rude, you remain calm. If they're dismissive, you don't take it personally. You've learned that your peace is yours, and no one can touch it unless you give them permission. That's where your real confidence lives, in your boundaries, in your discipline, and in your silence. You start to notice things others don't. You spot manipulation quicker. You see through drama faster. And instead of reacting, you withdraw with grace. You let your silence do the talking. And the people who try to disrupt your peace, they notice it. They feel it. Some will respect it. Others will be confused by it. But it doesn't matter. You're not here to convince anyone. You're here to protect your energy. There's something magnetic about someone who doesn't flinch, who can hear criticism and not be shaken, who can be left out, misunderstood, or even insulted and still remain grounded. That kind of presence is rare because it's earned. It's earned by choosing growth over ego, peace over proving a point, and silence over reaction. It's earned by knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you're no longer willing to engage with. The next time you feel the urge to react, to argue, to prove your worth, don't. Pause. Breathe. Remember that your calm is not weakness, it's strength. Your silence is not empty, it's full of self-respect. And your detachment is not cold, it's clarity. You're not removing yourself to punish anyone. You're removing yourself to protect the most valuable thing you have, your peace. And when you live from that place, there is nothing and no one that can truly shake you.